The person I'm going to talk to you about today is a very important person in the history of Singapore, of the first secondary school in Singapore, and was the largest flower in the world. He is Sir Stamford Raffles. Sir Stamford Raffles. Watch this video from beginning till end, share it, like it, and subscribe to it. This is Distinguished Toastmaster Brahma Kumar. Sir Stamford Raffles was born on 5th July 1781 and passed on 5th July 1826. There are very few individuals who are born and deceased on the same day. So his is one of those that you can remember in the future. Sir Stamford Raffles was a British statesman who served as the Lieutenant Governor of the Dutch East Indies between 1811 and 1816 and the Lieutenant Governor of Bencoolen between 1818 and 1824. He is best known mainly for his founding of modern Singapore and the Straits Settlements. Raffles was heavily involved in the capture of the Indonesian island of Java from the Dutch during the Napoleonic War. The Napoleonic War. The running of day-to-day operations on Singapore was mostly done by William Farquhar, but Raffles was the one who got all the credit. He also wrote the history of Java in 1817. Thomas Stamford Bingley Raffles was born on 5th July 1781 on board the ship Anne off the coast of Port Morant, Jamaica, to Captain Benjamin Raffles and Anne Raffles. Benjamin served as a shipmaster for various ships engaged in the direct trade between England and the West Indies. Although some biographers have suggested that Benjamin was involved in the slave trade, modern historians have refuted such claims. When Benjamin ended his involvement in the West India trade in 1800, he caused his family considerable hardship. The little money the family had went into sending the young Raffles to the Mansion House Academy, Hammersmith, a moderately priced boarding school offering Latin, Greek, French, arithmetic, bookkeeping, and geography that specialized in preparing boys for clerkships or the army. In 1785, at the age of 14, Raffles started working as a clerk in the London British East India Company, the trading company that shaped many of Britain's overseas conquests. 9 years later, in 1804, the 23-year-old Raffles married Olivia Marimni Devenish, a widow 10 years his senior, who was formerly married to Jacob Cassivalon Farquhar, an assistant surgeon in Madras, who had died in 1800. In 1805, Raffles was sent to the Prince of Wales Island, Malaya, starting his long association with Southeast Asia. He started with the post as Assistant Secretary under the Honorable Philip Dundas, the new Governor of Penang. At this time, he also made the acquaintance of Thomas Otto Travers, who would accompany him for the next 20 years. Raffles' knowledge of the Malay language and his wit and ability gained him favor with Lord Minto, Governor General of India, and he was sent to Malacca. In 1811, after the annexation of Kingdom of Holland by France during the Napoleonic War, Raffles had no choice but to leave the country. He mounted a military expedition against the Dutch and French in Java in the Dutch East Indies. The war was swiftly conducted by Admiral Robert Stopford, General Frederick Augustus Witherall, and Colonel Robert Rollo Gillespie, who led a well-organized army against an opposing army of mostly French conscripts with little proper leadership. The previous Dutch governor, Herman Willem Dindels, had built a well defended fortification at Mr. Cornelis, now Jati Nagara, and at the time the governor, Jan Willem Janssen, mounted a brave but ultimately futile defense as a fortress. The British, led by Colonel Gillespie, stormed the fort and captured it 3 hours. Within 3 hours, Janssen's attempt to escape inland was not successful and he was captured. The British invasion of Java took a total of 45 days, during which Raffles was appointed the Lieutenant Governor of the Dutch East Indies by Baron Minto before hostilities formally ceased. He took his residence at Buitenzorg and, despite having a small subset of Britons as his senior staff, kept many of the Dutch civil servants in the government structure. During the relatively brief British rule in Java, Raffles negotiated peace and mounted some significantly military actions against local Javanese princes, subjugate them to British rule. Most significant of these was the assault on Yogyakarta on 21st June 1812, known as the Sepoy Commotion. Yogyakarta was one of the two most powerful indigenous polities in Java. During the attack, the Yogyakarta Kraton was badly damaged and extensively looted by British troops. Raffles seized most of the contents of the court archive. The event was unprecedented in Javanese history. It was the first time an indigenous court had taken by storm by a European army, and the humiliation of the local aristocracy was profound. Although peace returned to Central Java in the immediate aftermath of the British assault, the events may have fueled deep-seated instability and hostility to European involvement that ultimately gave rise to the Java War of 1820s. Raffles also ordered an expedition to Palembang in Sumatra to unseat the local Sultan Mahmud Baharuddin II and to seize the nearby Bangka Island to set up a permanent British presence in the area. In the case of the return of the Java to the Dutch rule after the end of the War of Six Coalition in Europe. During his lieutenant governorship, Raffles played some restriction on the local slave trade in line with wider British policy across its Asian territories. Although slavery remained widespread and Raffles himself was served by a large retinue of slaves at his official residence in Java, Raffles also attempted a replacement of the Dutch system of forced agricultural deliveries in kind with a cash-based land tenure system of land management, probably influenced by the earlier anti-feudal critics of Dirk van Hogendorp. In 1815, Raffles left for England shortly before the island of Java was returned to the control of the Netherlands following the Napoleonic Wars and under the terms of the Anglo-Dutch Treaty of 1814. Raffles had been removed from his post by the East India Company ahead of the handover and officially replaced by John Fendall Jr. He sailed to England in 1816. In 1817, Raffles wrote and published The History of Java, describing the history of the island from ancient time as well as its geography, flora, and fauna. In 1817, Raffles was created a Knight Bachelor by the Prince Regent George IV, whose daughter Princess Charlotte was particularly close to him. At the publication of the book, he also stopped the name Thomas, referring to his middle name Stamford, possibly to avoid confusion. At the publication of the book, The History of Java, Raffles also stopped using the name Thomas, preferring to use his middle name Stamford, possibly to avoid confusion among associates with Sir Thomas Sylvester or his cousin Thomas Raffles, who both bore the same first name. On 20 February, he married his second wife, Sophia Hall, and later set sail to Bencoolen to take up his new post with his new wife. Raffles arrived in Bencoolen on 19 March 1818, where he was appointed as the Lieutenant Governor of Bencoolen. Despite the prestige connected with the title of Lieutenant Governor, Bencoolen was a colonial backwater whose only real export was pepper, and only the murder of a previous resident, Thomas Parr, gained it any attention back in Britain. Raffles found the place wrecked and set about reforms immediately, mostly similarly to what he had done in Java, abolishing the slavery and limiting cockfighting and such games. To replace the slaves, he used a contingent of convicts already sent to him from India. It was at this point that he realized the importance of a British presence that both challenged the Dutch hegemony in the area and could remain consistently profitable, unlike Bencoolen or Batavia. However, the strategic importance of poorly maintained but well positioned British possessions such as Penang or Bencoolen made it impossible for the British to abandon such unprofitable colonies in such proximity to the Dutch in Java. The competition in the area between Raffles and the aggressive Dutch certainly led, at least in part, to the Anglo-Dutch Treaty of 1824. Raffles looked into the alternatives in the areas, namely Bangka, which had been ceded to the Dutch after its conquest by the British during the occupation of Java. Bintan was also under consideration, despite the fact that Francis Drake overlooked the island before settling upon Penang in 1786. The Riau archipelago was an attractive choice just to the south of the Malay Peninsula because of its proximity to Malacca. In his correspondence with Calcutta, Raffles also emphasized the need to establish a certain amount of influence with the native chiefs. The Convention of 1814 returned Dutch territory that was held before 1803, which did not include Penang, which did not include Padang. Raffles asserted the British claim personally, leading a small expedition to the Sultanate of Minangkabau. Yet, as Raffles confirmed, Sultan regarding the absolute influence regarding the British rulers of the area, he realized the local rulers had only limited powers over the well cultivated and civilized country, and the treaty was largely symbolic and had little actual influence. Major General William Farquhar, the British resident of Malacca, had been attempting to negotiate commercial treaties with the local chief of the Riau archipelago, especially before Raffles' arrival. Farquhar was compelled to sign the treaty not with the official head of the Sultanate, but rather the Raja Mura, the regent or crown prince of Riau. He noted it as a success and reported it as such to Raffles. Raffles sailed to Malacca in late 1818 to personally secure a British presence in the Riau area, especially Singapore, which was favored by both through the readings of Malayan history and by Farquhar's exploration. Despite Lord Hastings' less than stellar opinion of Raffles before, the now well connected and successful Raffles was able to secure permission to set up a settlement. At this point in Malaysian history, the name Lion City was supplied. The city, Singapura, was in a strategically advantageous position, but Raffles was ordered not to provoke the Dutch, and his subsequent actions were officially disavowed by the British government. In London, Viscount Castlereagh attempted to quell Dutch fears, and continuing efforts were made to reach an agreement between the nations that eventually became the Anglo-Dutch Treaty of London of 1824. As well as the treaty, instructions were sent out to Raffles to undertake a far less intrusive actions. However, the long distance between the Far East and the Europe meant that orders had no chance of reaching Raffles in time. After a brief survey of the Karimun Islands on 29 January 1819, Raffles established a post at the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula. It was established that there was no Dutch presence on the island of Singapore. Johor also no longer had any control of the area, so contact was made with the Temanggah Abdul Rahman. The contacts were friendly, and Raffles' knowledge about the muddled political situation took advantage to provide a rudimentary treaty between the nominal chiefs of the area that called for the exclusivity of trade and the British protection of the area. Members of Raffles' party surveyed the island and proceeded to request the presence of the Sultan to sign a formal treaty, while Major Farquhar was ordered to do the same with Riau. A few days later, the formal treaty was signed by a man claimed to be the lawful sovereign of the whole of territories extending from Lingua and Johor to Mount Moa. This man was Hussein Shah, who, although having no previous contact with the British, had certainly heard of the might of the British Navy and was in no position to argue against the term. But Raffles was able to charm the man and to reassure him that the Dutch posed no threat in the area. Hussein Shah had been the crown prince of Johor, and while he was away in Pahang to get married, his father died, and his younger brother was made sultan, supported by some of the court officials and the Dutch. To circumvent the situation of having to negotiate with the sultan, influenced by the Dutch, Raffles decided to recognize on behalf of the British crown Hussein Shah as being the rightful ruler of Johor. Farquhar's attempt to establish a favorable treaty in Riau was met with greater challenge as the Dutch were present and made for a rather awkward position. The Dutch were alarmed and sent a small contingent to the island. Despite a covert offer of subterfuge against the Dutch offered by the Raja of Riau, Farquhar returned and an official protest was sent by the Raja to Java regarding the matter. Raffles declared the foundation what was to become modern Singapore on 6 February, securing the transfer of control of the island to the East India Company. With much pomp and ceremony, the official treaty was read out in languages representing all nations as well as Malay and Chinese inhabitants. On Hussein Shah was paid Spanish dollars 5,000 a year, while Temangan Abdul Rahman received 3,000 a year. Both massive sums at the time, roughly equivalent to 287,000 pounds and 172,000 pounds compared to the present time. Farquhar was officially named the resident of Singapore, and Raffles was named as agent to the most noble, the Governor General, the states of Riau, Lingin, and Johor. Although ownership of the post was to be exclusively British, explicit orders were given to Farquhar to maintain free passage of ships to the Straits of Singapore, and a small military presence was established alongside the trading force. After issuing orders to Farquhar and the remaining Europeans, Raffles left the next day, 7 February 1819. While in Singapore, Raffles established schools and churches in the native languages. He allowed missionaries and local businesses to flourish. A European town was quickly built to segregate the population separated by a river. Carriage roads were built and cantonments constructed for the soldiers. Raffles convened a meeting on 1st April 1823 with the intention of opening a Malay college in Singapore based on his observation on his years in Southeast Asia and his belief of importance of both the local and European languages. He personally gave $2,000 towards the effort. The East India Company gave $4,000 with the contribution from various subscribers totaling 17,500. This would be the founding of Raffles Institution. Raffles Institution was formed in 1823. Apart from a administrator of the British colonies, Raffles was also a zoologist, and his legacy lives on. A butterfly fish, woodpecker, barbet, pitcher plant, a species of ant, the largest flower, the Rafflesia, and a spider all have the name of Raffles in them. Such is the contribution of Sir Stamford Raffles, one of the founding fathers of Singapore and also of the Raffles Institution, which was the first secondary school in Singapore. With that, I end my session today. This is Distinguished Toastmaster Brahma Kumar. I shall see you again tomorrow.